Hi, everyone. Welcome to our inaugural episode of Spotlight On, a series of interviews brought to you by Overdeck Family Foundation. Join us as we sit down with the nonprofit leaders shaping the future of education and talk to them about innovation, evidence, and growth. My name is Lina Eroh, and I'll be your host for today's Spotlight on Growth. Joining me is Heejae Lim, founder and CEO of TalkingPoints, an edtech nonprofit with the mission to unlock the potential of families to fuel their children's learning, especially in under-resourced communities. TalkingPoints' multilingual platform connects and empowers families and educators using human and AI-powered two-way translated communication, coaching, and personalized content. Prior to founding Talking Points, Heejae worked on education reform for public schools in the Middle East and served as chief of staff to a special advisor to the Secretary of Education in the UK. She has been recognized as a TED Fellow, Echoing Green Fellow, Stanford Social Innovation Fellow, Ashoka Changemaker, and Forbes 30 Under 30 for education. Welcome to today's show, Heejae. To kick us off, why don't you share the story behind the creation of Talking Points and what inspired you to create a product that focuses on family engagement?
Yeah, thank you so much, Lina and the Overdeck Family Foundation for having me. The creation behind Talking Point. So, when I was 8, I moved from Korea where I was born, to England. I didn't speak a word of English. I joined school as an English language learner student. And my mom used the little English that she knew to collaborate with my teachers and help me with my schoolwork at home. It was an elementary school near in the neighborhood and very kind of Korean immigrant heavy. And I saw the influence my mom's involvement had on me and my sister's education. I still remember, in the parking lot, all these Korean parents crowding around our car when she came and picked us up to ask her all sorts of questions that they would have normally asked the teachers. And then I say on Saturdays, we would go to Korean school. So Monday to Friday, we'd go to public elementary school in England. And on Saturdays, we'd go to Korean school. And the contrast of the parent-teacher interactions that I saw with the same kids, same parents, same community, but just a different school system, I think had a huge impact on me. Um, and then later on, I realized that the idea of family engagement isn't new. Decades of research shows how powerful of a lever it can be. Family engagement has been proven to be twice as predictive in student success than that family's socioeconomic status. And if you think about it for a moment, it's incredible to know how powerful of a strategy it can be to bridge equity gaps. That's kind of the origin story of Talking Points and family engagement.
I love that, Heejae. My family also emigrated to the US from Russia, and I do think a lot about how a tool like this would have been so helpful to my family. My parents didn't speak any English, and those first few years are really difficult when you don't actually know how to engage and when you don't have the tools to engage. Um, and so I'm curious, both from the English as a second language perspective and just more generally, what challenges do you believe families face in engaging with their children's education? And how does Talking Points help address those challenges?
Yeah, absolutely. And Lena, I had no idea about
I
that
know,
with your
like you wouldn't know, right?
family. You kept that quiet for a while.
I was saving it for the
Yeah.
podcast.
Yeah, apparently. Families face a lot of challenges, and it's not just the families; it's the families and educators and school districts. So we really think about kind of what are the barriers to effective family-school partnerships and family engagement that everyone faces. And first of all, if you are a family member whose English is not your primary language, then communication and information barriers are really big, right? But even if you're an English speaking family, like understanding of the school system or what are the best practices to engage with the school system and your kids' schools, what questions to ask the teachers so that you can help your and support your students at home are real challenges that families face. At the same time, educators get very limited training on what effective school partnerships look like, especially if you're teaching in a classroom that is full of families who might look and speak differently to you. So educators also face these capacity challenges. And then let's zoom out and talk about school districts for a second. Ultimately, districts really are facing a lot of challenges around family engagement, diverse families, or a lot of families who may be asking them questions or kind of challenging them to do more for their students. But I think effectively kind of building those relationships can be really challenging. And at the same time, chronic absenteeism and learning loss that are pandemic induced are really disproportionately impacting underserved, diverse students that can cause even bigger equity gaps. So, yeah.
Yeah, so can you say more about what you mean by equity gaps and equitable outcomes when it comes to using talking points?
Yeah, I think that, it can really kind of what we talk about family engagement driving equitable gaps. I'll give you an example. I don't know if you saw the recent New York Times article on absenteeism. It showed that over 25% of students are chronically absent. And the numbers are even higher for low income communities, low income, traditionally under resourced communities. So, attendance, for example, is an area where we see the biggest gains from using talking points.
Mhm.
We have research showing that increased attendance by an average of 15% through the use of talking points for all students. But the rates of improvement are even higher for diverse and under-resourced students. So when we say equitable student outcomes, this is an example where all students can thrive, but we're actually focusing on driving the biggest gains for students who have been typically excluded or left behind. And guess what? We believe that family engagement can be a real asset to be leveraged, a tool and a strategy that can really drive equitable student outcomes for, especially for traditionally under-resourced students. Yeah.
Yeah, the attendance story right now is such an important one because I think, we talk a lot about our teachers teaching. Do they have the tools to teach? Are they teaching to grade level? All of these things. But I think before all that comes whether or not the child is even in the classroom or in the school
Yes.
building to learn. And we think about that a lot at the foundation. Like if they are not, like attendance is a precursor to achievement. You cannot learn if you are not in the building. Um, so you mentioned how important family engagement is, but I think one of the things we always hear about it in the education sector is that it's sort of like a nice to have, but difficult to measure and to scale. Do you have any examples of impact that you can share with us to disprove this argument?
Ooh, love this question. So, we have an in-house research team dedicated to kind of measuring and improving Talking Points impact. So the in-house research team works with our district partners to gather data, analyze how the use of Talking Points leads to improvements, and it allows us to understand, the interventions and the features we need to build in order to kind of drive the biggest gains for equitable outcomes. So in a recent third-party quasi-experimental study with one of our school district partners that serves about 30,000 students, so it was a large urban diverse school district, we found results that showed talking points led to higher test scores, course proficiency improvements, and lower absenteeism with a greater impact on traditionally underserved students. So, for example, in maths, we saw a 9% increase in standardized test scores. That equates to about 7 months of additional learning time at school. We also saw a 15% decrease in absenteeism, which was equivalent to 2,000 additional hours of learning. So, for example, this is an example where our research shows decreased absenteeism. So we built an attendance toolkit that educates families on the importance of student attendance and nudges to send so that they can also send the reasons for the absenteeism so that school districts can see the data and make it actionable kind of insights. to action, so that virtuous cycle of attendance is also kind of in 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 the mix. We're also finalizing a new study on attendance now, and we're actually seeing even larger gains than 15% decrease in absenteeism. And we're continuing to kind of increase the rigor of our research and impact measurement. And then one additional note, I know that a lot of the school districts are now struggling with funding gaps post ESSER. And, the 15% equivalent decrease in absenteeism actually was equivalent to driving 300 additional dollars of funding to the school district per student. So, when you think about the return on investment of family engagement interventions that's large in scale, that is cost effective, that is a relatively low lift, we really think that family engagement interventions like Talking Points is not a nice to have, right? Based on all the challenges that we discussed, it's a must have strategy to be able to improve student outcomes and well being at the end of the day. So.
Yeah, that's incredible. And I mean, these results are really from just making it, and to say it in the simplest terms, like easier for educators to communicate with families in their classrooms in a more personalized way, right? Essentially, that is like the secret sauce here. You have on time communication about the things that the kids are experiencing in the classroom to parents in the language that is spoken at home. And so it is pretty incredible to see. And Heejae, you mentioned scale. Can you tell us a little bit about how Talking Points has grown over the past, I guess, almost 10 years that you guys have been in existence?
Yeah. So really excited to share that Talking Points will reach about 4 million students and their families this school year. And we're on to track to almost double that by 2026. Our early growth was really fueled by word of mouth between teachers and families, showing that our solution was so greatly needed. And then since then, we've started partnering with school districts to drive systems level change and shift family engagement from what you mentioned as a nice to have to a must have, and from a goal in of itself to a strategy that really drives student outcomes and equitable outcomes. So we're now in one out of two districts across the country, including 10 of the 20 biggest school districts. And, we know that we're making a difference when we hear over and over again from educators that Talking Points is a, in quotation marks, game changer. Educators love that phrase for us. And, we're creating meaningful partnerships easier and more efficient to drive student outcomes for families and schools. And I think one of the reasons we've been able to do this is because we're doing it at scale in an accessible way and cost effectively at a single digit cost per student. And as I mentioned, when you think about it's a single dollar digit cost that drives 300 additional dollars of funding to a school district, it kind of seems like a no-brainer, right? To do this at
Yeah.
scale in a cost-effective way. So, yeah.
That's amazing. So you mentioned, game changer as something educators love to use. Maybe let's move to something that educators are a little bit maybe more iffy about, AI, which seems to be the word of the month, the year, maybe the next century, who knows. There's obviously been a lot written about the potential of AI, good and bad, to impact education, both in the short and long term. I'm curious if you can talk about how you incorporate AI into Talking Points and what role it plays in facilitating some of that communication you mentioned between parents and families and the school.
Yeah, absolutely. So Talking Points is an AI native solution, meaning that our approach has been centered on AI since we launched in 2015. So AI powers our day-to-day approach, our product innovation, and how we think about impact research, actually, too. So as an example, we've been using AI to power our ability to translate in over 150 languages. We combine AI-driven, machine learning algorithms with human translators to provide culturally relevant translations that context specific in education. And of course, as we expand, we're improving our translation over time with more data, more context that we are able to serve in. It also just facilitates inclusive and universal communication between families and schools. So it's really accelerated kind of our ability to do research and study what's important for schools. So, for example, we were able to analyze about 40 million messages using natural language processing techniques to understand what families and educators are talking about and what conversations can drive best outcomes. And if you
What are they
imagine,
talking about?
well, we're finding that a lot of the conversations are around logistics. But the best practices research shows that the more educators and parents are talking about student grades, homework, behavior, that is the behavior that actually really leads to better student outcomes. So, we're also using generative AI to be able to facilitate more of those conversations that we think is best practice. So super interesting to measure and drive our impact. We have also, launched the R&D initiative called Solutions Incubator to experiment, build, and test and research new AI-driven features as well. So as an example of that, we are looking at a feature called Message Mentor, where teachers can click a button and it transforms their message to parents in a best practice driven way. So more positive, using the sandwich feedback, making it more accessible and universal as well. So in that way, we're building the teacher capacity in using talking points and building those kind of trusting, meaningful relationships through the power of generative AI, which we think is super exciting as well.
I love that. So it does seem like you think one huge potential of AI is to make experiences more personalized for families and students. I'm curious what other potential benefits you're seeing specifically with talking points.
Yeah, so another kind of exciting development that we have with AI is to drive in the moment guidance and best practices. So we think about this intersection between data, research, best practices, and with the layer of user experience that makes it really easy and not an additional lift for parents and teachers. So it has to be in the moment guidance. So one of the things I mentioned is Message Mentor, where they can just compose a message. If a teacher is struggling with how to approach a subject to share with the parents, they can just put in a prompt about what they want to talk about, and the tool would craft a best practice message on the spot. And we're giving full control to the educators and editing, adding, kind of providing the tone of their own voice. So we
Wow.
really think about this impact on teachers where they can't work any harder. A lot of them are burnt out, unfortunately. Um, and, teachers need tools that make their jobs easier and lighten the load. But for something that can be really lightening the load so that they can do more of the teaching and less of, what requires cognitive brain power as well. So that's one kind of area that we're exploring. Another area that we're exploring using AI is how can families better support students at home? So
Mhm.
if the teachers are requesting to the families on support, let's say blank single digit arithmetic, then
Mhm.
AI can really help support and generate activities that families can do at home with the kids based on the topics that teachers are suggesting that they support with. So those are some examples that we're just really excited to explore more around family engagement and generative AI and making it easier, faster, and more effective in that relationship building between families and teachers, and of course, school districts too.
Yeah, that's incredible. And how do you work with the different communities to make sure that they are getting what they need from talking points and that you are solving real challenges that they have?
Yeah. Well, our work is really deeply informed by the stakeholders and voices of the school districts, educators, and families using talking points in their classrooms, in their homes. So we have a variety of dedicated feedback loops, including advisory panels, made up of our teachers, families, school administrators, and district leaders, including surveys, focus groups, and user interviews. So what this ultimately allows us to do is co-design solutions. So, for example, as I mentioned previously, many of our school districts are struggling with absenteeism. So together we designed and piloted an attendance toolkit that allows educators to send out templated messages to parents that then educate them on the importance of attendance and the consequence of their children missing school. And these messages are based on best practices, and they're educating on why attendance matters and how they can better support attendance. And I talked about some of the results that we saw around, chronic absenteeism reduction and increase in attendance. We also created a function for families to report reasons for absences in their home language, so that they are using kind of the comfortable, familiar system to be able to report it, which has led to a reduction in unexcused absences. So we believe that this toolkit, as an example, will lead to reduction in absenteeism as a whole, and we're piloting it with around 29 school districts right now, about 90,000 students. And one of the district administrators told us that the toolkit is making conversations around absences less reactive, less punitive, and more instead, it's a more positive, collaborative process with families in increasing attendance as well.
Right.
So
It probably
that's just
feels
an
more like curiosity driven and like the teachers reaching out because they are like personally invested in each child versus like
exactly,
punitive for
yeah.
missing school.
Yeah,
That's super helpful.
asset-based,
Yes.
collaborative, proactive relationships, super important. And attendance is just one of the areas that can make an impact, right? So,
Right, because we know once they're in the classroom, the chances that they will improve on their ELA, math, and everything else skills dramatically rises. I want to pivot as we finish up this interview to the future. You mentioned this in a few different ways throughout our interview, but I'm curious in what ways you think technology, including AI, will really continue to help shape education in the future for our students.
mm. Well, I think a lot of things here. First of all, I am really hopeful for the next decade because I really feel like we're in a unique moment in time where tailwinds are pushing the adoption of technology in a way that uses it for good, and especially in education. COVID sparked kind of a new recognition of the importance of family engagement, the importance of technology. Even the Department of Education is declaring family engagement as a key priority to support students in school districts. We have super rapid advances in AI technology, which makes this opportunity to make, personalized, customized, in the moment capacity building and coaching just feasible. At Talking Points, we've been kind of across or working towards this vision. Literally for the last 10 years, we wanted to do this with humans involved at the back end, but we just couldn't make it happen at scale.
Yeah.
Like, how do you support 4 million students and their families at scale with, human customization? But now we feel like generative AI can really support that customization, personalization, in the moment guidance. And at the same time, educators and school districts are really hungry for evidence-based interventions where
Yeah.
they can put the money behind and know what it's worth. So I feel like this is a moment where AI, the technology, family engagement, and the vision of Talking Points is really kind of coming together all of a sudden. And with our district partnerships and school districts across the country, we're able to kind of shine a light on what is possible in systems change, when you're using technology meets data meets research at scale in building those trusting partnerships with families. So we're just super excited for the future of family engagement.
Amazing. I mean, what an exciting time for Talking Points. And like you said, it does feel like all of a sudden everything is in place to really make your growth continue to explode so you can positively impact more families, more educators, and then the education sector as a whole. My last question, you sort of already answered it, but I want to give you one more opportunity. Looking ahead to the next decade in education, what makes you hopeful?
I think, I think as I mentioned, the intersection of education system ready for a change, ready for tech adoption, with this kind of stage of where the generative AI is, with kind of the need and the challenges that school districts are facing. I feel like the moment is now. And like if we miss it, we're missing a huge opportunity. So that sense of urgency, I feel, in systems change in the education system, I think that kind of ironically makes me hopeful and ironically makes me charge forward. Maybe not so ironically, but I feel like the moment is now and the future is somewhat bright. And caveating back to school districts are struggling a lot. So I don't want to be blindly optimistic, but I am optimistic about the future.
I mean, I love this idea of like the moment is now to make the change, though, right? We now have these tools at our disposal in a way that makes innovation and scale, I would say, more accessible and affordable than before. And that's good for both the providers like yourself and the districts who are hoping to try out some of these new systems in their schools. Like if you were
Right.
using 1 million human translators, talking points would not cost single digit per student. Like it wouldn't be possible. But AI and LLMs allow that to happen. So, what an exciting time for you guys. We are so excited to continue supporting you and having been partners for so long. And I'm so thankful you got to join us here today, Heejae. Thank you for so much for joining me. And thank you, all of you listeners, for joining us on this episode of Spotlight On, brought to you by Overdeck Family Foundation. We do hope you enjoyed it. Be the first to know when our next episode hits by subscribing to our YouTube channel and our foundation's newsletter. And bye for now from all of us here at Overdeck Family Foundation. Thank you.